Hey, all, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you might be joining us from in the world today. My name is Meg Alexander. I am, as always, eager and excited to get started with another Power to Fly Chat and Learn virtual event. Now, today we're going to be talking about the power of presence, building an authentic personal brand, and meaningful partnerships. Now, before we dive in, I just want to take a second here and welcome everybody to us today. Now, before I do that, I do just want to real quick flash our code of conduct on the screen here. This is especially kind of scary looking. It's a big wall of legalese, but basically what it boils down to is just don't be a jerk, okay? As long as you operate from a place of kindness and respect, it's pretty hard to go wrong from there. But if you want details on this, just DM me. You can find my name, Meg Alexander, in the drop-down menu in your Zoom group chat. Now, before we get going, I do want to say hello and welcome to everybody. Hi. And this is your first Power to Fly event, then welcome. We're so happy to meet you. Now, if you are one of our frequent flyers, my love is no less real. I love, love, love seeing our familiar names, and faces, and avatars in the chat. So thank you all so, so much for sharing that with us today. Now, as we go through today's event, I want to highlight a couple things for you, especially if today's your first event. You should know that participation at Power to Fly events is key. Okay, we want to know what we want you to be able to participate as much as you want. You are welcome to do that in a couple different ways. You are always welcome to turn your cameras on if you'd like to share your smiling, maskless faces with us safely. But y'all, there is no need to, be Instagram perfect, okay? Just because I got fancy and washed my hair yesterday does not mean that you can't come to us from your kitchen tables with your bathroom or your bathrobe on, messy buns, doesn't matter to us, okay? We don't want to stand on ceremony. We just want to meet you where you are. Now, as we go forward into today's event, we are recording. And what that means for all of you is you don't have to take notes. You get to sit back and relax, enjoy the conversation that I'm about to have with Daryl, and not worry if you miss a resource that's listed or a link that's shared. So, the other thing I want to encourage y'all is to please feel free to chime in the chat. I know we've got some people starting to come on here. I would love, love, love to see it, y'all. Please feel free to dive into that group chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. I'm always very eager to see how far our global audience spreads. So please feel free to let us know where you're joining from. And if you know, please feel free to share whose land you're on. I'm coming to you from Toledo, Ohio. This is land that belonged to the Fox, Kickapoo, and Potawatomi tribes in my area. What else? What else? What else? Okay, we've got Cheyenne, sorry, joining us from New York City. Thanks, Cheyenne. Ria's also chiming in from Toledo. Hey, Ria. Daryl will chime in just a minute. We've also got Maria coming in from Phoenix, Arizona. Sienna's joining us from Los Angeles. Thank you all so, so much for chiming in today. All right, now the last thing I want to encourage y'all to do is to, like I said, remember that we are recording, so you don't have to take notes. And what that means is you can share this recording with anybody you'd like. So let's say that Daryl says something today completely mind-blowing and you can't wait to share it with a friend or coworker or a relative. You can do that a couple different ways. You can always head over to our YouTube channel. We're live streaming there right now. Hi, YouTube. And we would absolutely love to see you over there. We've got a section of our chats, kind of our best of greatest hits is saved on the YouTube channel. So there's really a ton of great stuff there. And today's recording will usually be there by end of business today. The other thing that we'll do is whether you're able to join us or not, no hard feelings. Everybody that registered for today's event is going to get an email from us in about 4 to 5 business days. And that's going to have a link to where you can rewatch this recording when it's posted on powertofly.com. So obviously, I recommend that you check out our YouTube channel. That is, it's very accessible, it's really fast, but I very much encourage you to check out the website, especially if today's your first Power to Fly event, because we have resources and stuff that we want to put in y'all's hands, okay? Anything we can do to move the needle when it comes to gender parity and pay equity in the workplace is something we want to do, and interests that I'm pretty sure match with some of y'all in the audience as well. So all right, now enough about Power to Fly and us. I'm very excited to get today's conversation going. Now, Daryl is joining us here today on behalf of Elastic. Now, I wasn't sure if anybody, what kind of name recognition y'all would have. So Elastic is the search AI company, and they enable everyone to find the answers they need in real time using all of their data at scale. Now, Elastic unleashes the potential of businesses and people through this search AI platform. Now, it's used by more than 50% of the Fortune 500, brings together the precision of search and the intelligence of AI to enable everyone to accelerate the results that matter. Now, by taking advantage of all the structured and unstructured data, securing and protecting private information more effectively, Elastic's complete cloud-based solutions for search, security, and observability can help organizations to deliver on the promise of AI. I'm really excited to get us started and talking more about Elastic. But before we do that, I want to introduce y'all to Daryl. Now, Daryl E. Peak II is joining us today. Daryl is the Senior Director of Public Sector Channels and Alliances for Fed and SLED at Elastic. He leads the team focused on delivering enterprise search, observability, and security solutions to government and educational organizations. With over 15 years of executive leadership experience in both government and tech sectors, Daryl has also held key positions at Salesforce, Google, and the Department of Homeland Security, driving digital transformation and fostering innovation. Now, his passion lies in leveraging his expertise in legislation, policy, and emerging technologies to guide strategic priorities and enterprise technology investments for public sector agencies. Daryl, I'm really excited to get to introduce you to our community. What else would you like our audience members to know about you before we dive into questions?
Well, I put it in that I'm located in Arlington, Virginia, but I'm originally from Philadelphia, PA. So I'm from the inner city. Started out in just a low income household. Just really believed in doing something better and making an impact. So as I went through my career and I had more success as I went along, it was all about how do you help others. I had a lot of mentors along the way. I'll talk about that a little bit more during our discussion. But one of the things that I would ask them is saying, I could never pay you back for what you're giving me. Just give me your time, you give me your expertise. How can I pay you back? And they say, you know what, Daryl, don't worry about paying me back. Worry about paying it forward, right? Pay it forward. And I often say that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants because I had so many great mentors along the way, and definitely hope that I'm able to share some level of insights with everyone about ways that I have been able to have success in my career and things that I would recommend for those that are looking.
Excellent. Can't wait to dive in. Okay, now I do want to highlight for y'all. We do have a bunch of questions we're going to ask Daryl. Questions that you all wondered at registration. But if you have questions that you would like to submit today, or if we're going over one of your questions and you want us to dive deeper in, please, 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 y'all, feel free to jump into that chat box at any point. Feel free to share any questions you are interested in over there, so that way I can make sure that you get the value out of today's event. All right, let's stop sharing our screen here. There we go. And let's dive in on some of these questions because we got some really good ones, honestly. Where did this go? There we go. Okay, so when we talk about personal brand, let's level set a little bit. If we're talking about personal branding as the focus for today's chat, what does that mean to you? If somebody's going to develop their own personal brand, what do you think that is?
Right. And that's a great question, Mag. And one of the things that I talk about when you talk about your brand is what is your calling card, right? What do people see when they engage with you, and what do people talk about when they're not around you? And that's one of the things that I focus on is saying, well, how can I create a consistent experience on who I am based on my experiences, based on who I am, based on my background and ethnicities, in order to really be authentic in myself and be yourself in your own skin. So I typically like to be part of a brand that not only communicates acceptance, communicates diversity, communicates belonging, but also being able to say, well, what are some of the things that we can do to bring out our best selves as we go to our day-to-day efforts?
I like that. And I think that's a really good way to describe it because I feel like personal brand, like I'm not that young, but I'm not that old either. And personal brand was not a thing that anybody ever talked about prior to, like, I don't know, maybe like 5 or 8 years ago, at least in my earshot. And so I think it is really helpful to kind of dial in on what that is, because if you are just a person, it's very easy to be like, well, why do I need a brand? Like, what do you mean it's a brand? It's not really any different than like your professional reputation, right? It's just a different buzzword that we're using to describe
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. If you even if you think about the products that are out there, right? A Coca-Cola, or when you go to stay at a Marriott hotel, or when you go to interact with a certain vehicle, those things have brands associated to them, and you know what to expect when you engage with those brands. And the same for us as individuals is that there are certain elements that we represent every day, and we want that to be consistent. And as I mentioned, not only when folks interact with you, but also when folks are not around you, how are you represented?
Yeah, that's my favorite part of the brand aspect, is that like what your brand is, or what you should be going for, is what you want people to say about you when you're not in the room.
Yes.
So I think that's excellent. I love, love, love that level set. Okay. So when we are trying to build an authentic personal brand, what are some building blocks? Like where should people start if they're like, I don't even know what my brand should be?
Right. Well, one of the things that I talk to my mentees about is modeling. Is that as you start to go towards your trajectory, what are some things that you would like to accomplish? Because as you start to align your accomplishments, then you start to say, well, what do I want to have myself be, whether that's as a professional, whether that's personal, whether that's academic, how do I want that outcome to be achieved? And usually I say that it starts with your own insights. So not only your insights as you engage with individuals from day to day and have conversations and start to have a concept or an understanding of what you would like to do, but also the books that you read. I spent a lot of time reading uh, personal brand books and motivational books and things of that nature. One of my favorite books is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And really, it talked about how you change lead into gold, but how you have to go on a journey in order to achieve that outcome. And that's really what I did. I said, well, what is this thing that I can do being an inner city kid from Philadelphia? And how can I matriculate that into becoming a leader who can actually have impact within organizations? So, one is just individual who you are. Two are the modeling of individuals that you would like to model yourself after, because modeling is not necessarily imitation, it's just saying who would you like to be represented as. And then three is really a aspect of your network, right? And how your network starts to identify the brand that you have. And then I would say, in light of that, what are some outcomes that you want to achieve? I have things that I typically align with from a values perspective. I call them the I's. And basically, I want to make an impact. I want to be innovative. I want to be influential. And I want to improve the environments that I'm around and information share. So if I have those I's that align with who I am and my values, then my brand or who I am can align with that. And that's where you talk about authenticity.
Okay. No, I like this. And I think it's a good, like, it's kind of a good like checklist to start from. Because personally, I don't know that I would know where to start, but I like this idea of like kind of trying to find other people that you also admire or people that who are perceived in a way that you would like to be.
Right.
So I think that's excellent. All right, let's see. Okay. A lot of us, myself included, work primarily in a virtual world, right? Like I don't have an office that I go into just in my house. Like I don't work with, face to face with other people, in an office setting. How can people cultivate a strong presence and a personal brand if they're working remotely or with teams that are just distributed?
That's a good question. And one of the things that I did, and this was during the COVID years, is I had a team and I had a network that, really we got together virtually. So in these Zoom sessions, we would have happy hours or we would have engagements or we would have just thought sharing events in order to really connect. So as you come online, you can still have a brand, but once again, it's being able to connect. So being on video and having conversation and being able to really challenge the thought process in regards to what topics make the most sense for you, so this way you can drive to that better self. Now, as far as from a working perspective, that brand is associated to your professional brand. Your professional brand is really, are you delivering on the expectations? Because yes, you can be virtual, but there is a certain level of trust that's developed between individuals, even virtually. So it's saying, okay, well, when you said you were going to send me that deck, did we get that deck? Or if you say you were going to connect me with the HR executive so that this way I could potentially get that job, did you do that? So it's being able to establish certain levels of trust based on certain values in order to achieve those outcomes. And it goes into some levels of culture, which we'll talk about later, but it's really the behaviors that you have are associated to your brand, whether that's virtual or in person. In person helps you have those in-person elements and really start to connect at the human level, but at the same time, you can do that virtually. I meet folks from all over the country, and actually all of you all over the country. And it's interesting how we can each bring our own experiences to the table and have true conversations that help us connect, but also help us create a certain level of authenticity based on who we are and what we represent.
Yeah, no, I mean this completely tracks. All right. So if we have people who are, trying to focus on creating that brand, especially as they are changing careers or pivoting industries. What advice do you have for people that are trying to make sure that they are representing themselves authentically, especially if they're moving into a new space?
Right. That's a great question. And we're in a virtual environment. So one of the things that I say is you have to create your storefront. What does that mean? Well, you have to leverage social media in a positive manner. So this way you represent yourself when you have those engagements, but also you want your brand to be represented online. So therefore, 24 hours a day, someone can go to your either your LinkedIn or your Twitter or whatever social media platform you're using in order to say, oh, what are the things that this person is prioritized? Who am I, not only in person, but also virtually? I will say that I started using LinkedIn earlier on, and more seriously when I was at Homeland Security. We were trying to roll out this cybersecurity program and wanted people to know about it. So, in effort to get the word out, sometimes sending out emails is not enough. Sometimes having large auditoriums filled with folks are not enough. And we would send out articles through LinkedIn in order to convey a message. And as I started to do that, I only had a few hundred followers. And that's one of the things that I would like to emphasize as well is that your community, your authenticity, your brand, let it start where it starts at and you build from there. So I had a few hundred a couple of years ago, I'll say about 7 to 10 years ago. And now I'm up over 30,000 connections within LinkedIn. But it is because I created a consistent message on who I was and I remained committed to that message. And also I stayed authentic in the delivery of what I have thought about and what I have created for myself.
Cool. I'm loving these answers. This is really, really good stuff for people to kind of take in.
Well, yeah, and I
Um,
think one of the things is a headshot, right? How does your
yeah.
headshot? What do you represent? I'll see a lot of great headshots here inside of the Zoom, and it's saying, okay, well, what does your picture look like? And when someone comes to your page, do they see someone who is welcoming? Do they see someone who wants to engage, or do they see someone who is disengaged? Do they see someone who is with their family? Do they see someone who is out on a vacation or traveling somewhere? So those things can definitely be represented if that's what you want to be part of your brand. If you want folks to say, oh, this person is Meg the Traveler because she has the Eiffel Tower behind her. That is great. Like you want to have that. Like don't try to align with someone else's. Just feel more comfortable and feel comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah. I think that's probably the part that is where most people get in their own way, right? Because we sometimes, or at least me, I'm always thinking, well, I should probably be more professional. I could always be a little more professional. And that's one of those things that is like, oh, it's like that little voice that just gets in your head and it's like, no, 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 that's how we ruin things is with the overthinking and the like trying to set it all up correctly the first time. I think you're
Right.
right. It's a very good and better advice to start with where you know. Where do you know things about yourself? What are the things that you enjoy and then kind of build from there.
And I would say that it's also important to, as you are being authentic, to read the room, right? Because if you go to a nice black tie event, you don't want to necessarily wear swimming trunks, right? So you want to be appropriate for the environment that you're in, but at the same time, what are the elements that are consistent with what you talk about or what you
Mhm,
prioritize or what you value? You can still bring that to the table without having to necessarily create a environment that, may not necessarily take away from your brand.
mhm. Yeah. All right. Now we've talked and you've touched a little bit about how authenticity is a really key factor in here. And within these partnerships, these like, business buddies you're making, you do want to build and maintain an element of trust. Um, what are some practical ways to maintain that your presence or your influence in spaces where you might feel underrepresented? I'm thinking rooms where either, meetings happen that you're not a part of, or situations where it's like, okay, well, why are we making this decision without including someone from XYZ, like ERG or something? But what would you tell this person?
Right. Well, one, and I learned from an old Army lieutenant colonel to give praise in private, praise in public and hell in private, right? So being able to praise, situations that are positive, but when you do have a negative scenario, sometimes it's easier to call out a one-on-one session and have a closed door conversation about some of the things that you're concerned about and being
Yeah.
able to articulate your thoughts in a way that says, okay, well, this is the reason why I feel like this person should have been in the meeting, or this is the reason why I feel like the exclusion of a person may have caused us to get delayed in what we were trying to accomplish. So I think overall, it's the ability to have that one-on-one connection and to meet at a level of respect. So
Mhm.
one of the things that I work with my team on are values, and we have team values. And because sometimes you think about the overall organizational vision, mission, and values, and you're like, okay, well, that's our values. And I realize that it is down to the actual team level that you have to create these values. So ours is respect, trust, transparency, and customer success and innovation. So being
Mhm.
able to say, okay, well, what are our values? What are we aligned with? Because then that becomes our North Star. So in
Yeah,
situations where there may be a meeting that may not have gone the way that we anticipated, or there may be an interaction that we need to take another look at. Those are things that we can say, okay, well, what are our values, and are we living to the values that we said we are going to, hold each other accountable to? So there's a
yeah.
level of accountability that we have to also make sure that we put out front and honor.
I think that's huge, right? Is, because when you're trying to build these relationships, you need to be honest about like what you can bring to that relationship, to that partnership. But you're right. I mean, it is very difficult to make sure that you are staying authentic to yourself, especially if you are like me, a recovering people pleaser. It is very, very easy to be like, no, I can do this, I can do all the things. And it's like, I know you want people to think you can do all the things. However, let's think about what the more realistic personal brand is, right? Because nobody can be like Superman,
Right.
and we probably should try. Yeah.
And I think it's about trust and establishing trust. And one the equation that I created around trust is proximity and values. Like the closer we are together and the more that we align from a value perspective, we can have trust. So things can be said. And of course, when things are above bar, that definitely is an easy conversation to have. But when
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily meet the expectation, there's enough capital that's been created where, I may have said something that may have not necessarily gone the right way. We can at least say, okay, well, I know deep down Daryl respects me. He definitely means well, and he does not mean to hurt my feelings or make me feel awkward. And that's one of the things that we run into is that, folks don't have proximity. So therefore, going back to our conversation, well, say if a person does come in swim trunks, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they are from Hawaii. Maybe they like this. Maybe they like to get on a surfboard. Those are things that we have to consider in understanding how you incorporate empathy into your engagements and conversations with people. So this way, you're not limiting them in their ability to be themselves and be authentic.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm loving where all of this is going here. Okay. If we are, one of the things that we talk about a lot here is storytelling. And you had talked a little bit about knowing what your story was. In what ways can storytelling help enhance your efforts in personal branding and building partnerships?
Really good question. And I think it's about, connectivity, right? When I talk about childhood stories and things that I've experienced or my work environment, folks want to hear about, how was it working at Google and how was it working at Salesforce and how was it working in the government? And I believe that when you create the stories and you are able to share the stories, you're also able to create connection. How are you able to connect? And those are things that I really value. The one thing that I really enjoyed about my time at Salesforce is they did a great job of storytelling. They would talk about the customer experience or the employee experience. They would talk about the person that went on vacation and went to the Marriott and wanted to swipe into their room and have the greatest vacation ever. And that's really where you're able to create a connective tissue because it really represents who you are, right? Because it's all about perception. So the perception that I have may be different than the perception you have at that moment. But then as you continue to tell your story, we see how we all align. Let's think about the best dinner that you've had, or the best trip that you've taken, or the best experience that you had at work, or even being able to win that great award that you were applying for. Those things are all experiences and stories that actually connect us and bring us together more than they divide us and bring us apart.
And I think that's good. When people ask you about your story, what do you tell them? Do you have like obviously different versions of like, a super short trailer versus a, a fever or a elevator pitch kind of thing. But when you have told your story or shared your story effectively, how have you done that?
Well, I would start, and one of the things that we talk about is being authentic, but also being honest, right? I talk about how I am from the inner city. I talk about how I am from a single parent household and being able to really, and also I'm the first in my family to get a college degree. So being able to leverage that as a starting point, but not the ending point, is really how I can tell my story and actually meet folks all the way in between. Because if I don't have a story where it shows some level of persistence, resilience, and overcoming, then that's really where it starts to say, well, is this person really someone I can talk to? Because I'm struggling trying to find that next job, or I'm struggling trying to make that connection with my kid, or I'm struggling trying to be a better spouse, right? So those things are struggles. So how are you working through those struggles in order to achieve that outcome? And I think it helps in us being vulnerable to a certain degree, but also express empathy and understanding what that other person outside of you or on the other side of you is going through.
Yeah, yeah, the empathy piece is absolutely crucial for sure. Okay. One of the things that I struggled with, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but one of the things that I struggle with when I'm building that authentic personal brand is imposter syndrome. I know that I am very mean to myself about this in ways that I would not allow anybody else to be mean to me. So, what should we do when we're thinking about this? If you are a person that struggles with imposter syndrome, how should you think about that or avoid falling into that trap when trying to build your own personal brand?
You know, hmm, it's interesting that you say that. Um, it's going to take me to a story that, because people ask me about the flower. They say, Daryl, why do you always have a flower on? So you see in my headshot, I have a flower, and now I have a flower on, and I've been wearing flowers for a number of years now. And when people ask me about the flower, I say it's my flower of power. I said, well, what does that mean? I said, well, I know people use it, for fashion, and you may see some folks wear it, but to me, it has semblance because I was the young guy in the room. In some cases, I was the only in the room. And I, sometimes felt that level of imposter syndrome and saying, okay, well, I am I supposed to be here? Right. And you start asking those questions in your head. But then I started to think about, well, if I wasn't, then I wouldn't be here. So I have to show up. And what the flower became is a representation of the flower of power. Now, the story behind it, I don't know how many of you are familiar with childhood books, but I like the story of Dumbo. So, as many of you may know, Dumbo was the flying elephant. And the story of Dumbo starts out by him having these really big ears, but then having a feather. And the feather, he would use the feather every time he would fly. And at one point in the book, he didn't have his feather. And that's when his mentor or the mouse told him that he could fly without the feather. But the feather always represented his ability to fly. And that's what I use the flower for, is that it is my flower of power that I should be, that I have to be, and that it is something that is important for me to be there and to show up.
I really like that. I think that's a really, really cool way of looking at your personal brand and you're like you said, tying it into a story. It's got a lot of universal appeal because I feel like even if you are not a person who was read Dumbo, I feel like most people have a large, like at least Western world, we probably have an understanding of the character archetype. So I think that's great. Um, Actually, Francois is chiming in the chat here saying they were in a webinar with If You Ask Betty about imposter syndrome. And she suggests naming the imposter syndrome monster and then you'll be able to defeat it, although you wouldn't ever get rid of it permanently. And I think that's another really good way of doing it, that kind of like, not necessarily compartmentalization, but like gamification kind of thing of
Right.
like, all right, that voice was valid. It helped me to kind of step up my game in some areas, but you're not so valid anymore. So let's just shush and kind of sit in the back of the bus instead of driving for a while.
Yeah, and the one thing I would say, I played a lot of sports growing up, and sometimes you go into a game and you feel like, oh well, did I practice enough? Did I prepare enough? Am I ready for the occasion? And I would say that that confidence and you preparing for it should always give you comfort in the fact that, well, whatever happened as the outcome, know that you brought your best person to the table. And with that, you're able to overcome any challenges that might come. So, once again, you are there because you were meant to be there. And then, secondly, is that with preparation comes confidence. And with that confidence, it will not say it will eliminate, it will lessen the aspects of imposter syndrome.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Very much helps to kind of ground yourself in like, no, 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 this is something I know I do well. Like start here, that's your baseline, build from there. I like that a lot. Let's see. C. Johnson is chiming in saying preparation equals confidence. And I would absolutely agree with that. I think there's a lot of things in your in adulthood that you kind of have to do scared, but you got to do them anyway. And I think you're right. That preparation, at least for me, is like, no, 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 no. You've spent a million hours with your nose in the book trying to learn the material. I mean, some of it must have stuck. So kind of relying on yourself that way. I think that's good.
Well, and it's a term, the five P's. There are in some certain circles, so six P's, but the five P's is prior preparation prevents poor performance. So yes,
Ooh, okay.
to utilize that as a mechanism in order to achieve and overcome, that is something that I also have used throughout my career as well.
Very nice. Okay. Um, okay, this one I thought was very interesting, and I didn't write this question, promise y'all, but I am very interested in the answer as well. This person said, what strategies can be employed to constructively manage sharing personal information, particularly regarding disabilities, that may impact perception but not performance? So I struggle with this a lot. I am neurodivergent and live with bipolar disorder type 2. I am in a very resourced and luxurious place in my life where I get to use this as kind of a litmus test. I don't generally, within reason, have to worry about disclosing this to somebody because in general, it's not really going to impact my livelihood or the livelihoods of people close to me. Now, that is not everyone's position, but that's what came to mind, like my mind when I was reading this question is like, it seems to me like this is somebody who has like either a disability or something that needs an accommodation, and they want to be able to disclose, but don't want to be judged because of this. So from your end, have you ever had to deal with anything like this where you needed to, maybe disclose something about your abilities, but you were worried that it would be misperceived?
Um, I haven't encountered it specifically for me, especially around having an accessibility or disability challenge. But I would say that I have worked with individuals who've had disabilities, and really it's about, connecting with the person. Once again, proximity and values, right?
Mhm.
Essentially, that person wants to do a good job. Now, how you convey that, once again, it's about being able to have a courageous conversation and saying, well, can I have a conversation with you? Can I talk about this? Can I talk about some of the things that I'm concerned about? And how should I address that going on? Because every environment is different. I'll say that at Elastic, we have values that we call short source code. And with that, we're able to really emphasize bringing our authentic selves within the office and within the workplace. And that if there are needs for accommodations, the organization is willing to step up and provide those accommodations for that individual. But the other thing that I enjoy, and we talked about this in the prep call a little bit, is that all our meeting rooms are named after superheroes.
Yes, I forgot we talked about this.
Because of that, you think about the story of the superhero where there's a certain aspect where they're strong, but there's other aspects where they may be weak.
Mhm.
And all of us have it. So being able to lean in to your superpower gives you the ability to not only be your best self in whatever environment you are in, but just know that whatever is perceived as a disability could potentially be a strength in the environment because you provide a perspective or point of view that maybe others on your team may not have. And that may be crucial in you actually achieving the goal and bringing the maximum value to whoever is impacted.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this I feel like this question is it's a pretty American centric one, if only because so much of our lives is wrapped up, so much of our lives and our healthcare is wrapped up in our employment. Because there are people chiming in the chat saying like, oh yeah, there's accessibility for accessibility for people with disabilities acts and that kind of stuff. Totally get that, and those are awesome and very much in place for a reason. But I think when this person wrote in, it seemed to me more like it was along the lines of like ADHD or like a learning disability, something that wouldn't necessarily be like accommodated for on a legal capacity. Like there's no like baseline, like they have to give you note paper or whatever. So if I misinterpreted that question, whoever sent it in, please feel free to let us know in the chat, and we can dive in if you need any other info there. Let's see. Okay, so let's go with some practical branding strategies. Other than LinkedIn, which I think is what most people think of in terms of, networking or social media for business, what other platforms are effective for sharing your professional skills and your qualifications?
It's interesting because I use primarily four different platforms. LinkedIn, I use the most in regards to my professional. I also use X or Twitter as for professional items as well, some personal, but a number of professional reposts and things of that nature. I'll say that, Instagram is more personal, and then of course Facebook is with my family. So you have different personas that you have based on the environment or based on the platform that you're using. The other thing that I would say is, that is more the macro approach towards connecting, right? But also, it does benefit you to be part of organizations that are aligned with whatever, idea, whatever goal, whatever professional group you're a part of. So that this way you can create a network of, just professionals that are aligned to a specific topic that you're interested in. So I would say that one part is being able to understand what information you want to share based on the platform, but I would say that LinkedIn and Twitter have been very helpful from a professional perspective, but also being part of professional organizations within my community that I'm able to not only learn to hear from speakers, but also to be part of a leadership team that is helping to put together either events or lead centers of excellence or the like. So I would say that, part of it is going to be the social part, but also in person, what are you doing in order to extend your professional brand?
Yeah, I like that. Francois in the chat sharing if you're an admin professional, there's several, including the Future Focused Admin and the Beacon Institute. These are really good options. I also want to kind of revisit this in terms of like if there's an online portfolio or something. Obviously, this is going to change depending on what your industry level is and what kind of offerings you might have. But do you consider an online portfolio like a best practice to accompany whatever, LinkedIn profile and that kind of stuff? Or do you think it's more depends if you have a resume that would include those kinds of things?
It depends. I would say that a lot of different websites also become somewhat of that portfolio, right? So you got Indeed, you got Monster, you got a lot of professional websites that you can put your information on, and folks can find you and identify you based on your background, skill set, and experiences. I say that if you want to maximize the net that you cast in regards to employers or potential employers, LinkedIn becomes that fast answer. But also, like, there are definitely a number of ways that you can also get your name out there and get the attention of recruiters or folks that are interested in hiring some great skilled folks. But one of the things I wanted to go back to, and I think this is about more, progression of both at both from the life perspective and professional perspective, is something that I did a long time ago. So I talked about my eyes already, but also I grade myself every year. Say, grade yourself. What do you mean? So what I started to think about is that when we talk about each other and how, if I ask you, Meg, how are you feeling? Well, a couple of areas that I'm initially looking at, I'm saying, well, how are you mentally? How are you physically? How are you emotionally? How are you spiritually? How are you academically? Like, what are those areas that, kind of make up who you are, right? When you say you're happy, what are the aspects that combine or the equation that creates that happiness? So I started to grade myself on mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, academic, political, professional, and also financial, right? And being able to say, okay, well, how am I doing? Because as you mentioned earlier, and this is why I wanted to bring it up, is that you're your toughest critic. Like you may not want somebody else to give you a B, but you may give yourself a B somewhere, right?
Are you
And
kidding? I always give, I swear I never give myself higher than a B on anything, ever. Sure. Because it's always, you're fighting against the picture in your head, right? Of like what you thought it was going to be or how you know you could turn it out.
absolutely. So if
Ugh.
you have those macro areas that you're saying, okay, well, how am I doing mentally? And mentally maybe, am I doing meditation? Or mentally maybe, well, am I comfortable in certain environments, or I'm comfortable having certain conversations? I'm physically, right? Am I going to the gym? Am I doing my walk? Am I, doing my yoga, whatever the case may be? And once you give yourself that grade, well, that grade, right? The question then becomes, what is your ideal A? And I think a lot of us individually can say that too, right? Because like we have a current state, a baseline, but then we say, well, what is that ideal A that I want to achieve? And being able to set that up is saying, okay, well, if there's a delta between where you are in that ideal A, then what are the steps that you need to take in order to get to that next level? Right? And that's where you get your, quote unquote resolutions or anything like that. And I do it in December. So I grade myself in December, and usually in January is when I start the resolutions. And I say, okay,
Mhm.
well, what is the, mental goal, right? It may be to use headspace every day or use calm every day. And
Mhm.
what is physical? Maybe go to gym 3 times a week. And what is the spiritual? Maybe it is, reading a book or doing prayer, whatever the case may be. And those things come together in order to create this human that's saying, okay, well, I know that I'm not where I want to be, but I know where I'm at and I know how I'm going to get there. So that is the thing that really is exciting. The other side of it is that every year your ideal A changes. So you're always moving to the right, and hopefully you're able to get to that outcome that you want to achieve, because certain things may not be prioritized anymore. You may say,
Mhm.
okay, well, maybe I've achieved what I wanted to achieve academically, so I'm not necessarily prioritizing getting that PhD anymore, but I still want to read. I still want to understand what are some of the new topics. I still want to know what are the new technologies that are out there. So those are
So
things,
adjustable goalposts, basically.
but it's yours. I don't
Yeah,
define it. You define that. So
I
that's a
like
thought
that. Mhm.
out there
No, I
for
think that's good. All right, we did have a question in the chat here that was really, really good. Okay, Nadja had asked, for LinkedIn, what's your opinion on posting employer social posts to your profile? Could it improve your personal brand or would it not be useful? So we talked about this yesterday, I want to say with Lorraine K. Lee. If y'all didn't check that out, you should absolutely search her up on our profile or on our YouTube channel. I'll send a link here in a minute. But what do you think about for people on LinkedIn? Should they post or reshare things that their employer posts? Is that, a good way to start building your brand, or is it not?
I think it is. Actually, I do it all the time. So if you are connected with me or follow me on social media, I post a lot of stuff on Elastic, but when I was at Google, I posted a lot on Google, and when I was at Salesforce, I did the same. And I even mentioned what I did when I was at Homeland Security when I was talking about the cybersecurity program that I was part of. And what it does is it helps you create a brand associated to a brand. So, it comes to a point where, at one point I was like Daryl from Salesforce, right? Did you talk to Daryl from Salesforce or Daryl from Homeland Security or Daryl from Google? And it does help increase your branding, because one of the things that LinkedIn does is it connects professionals together, right? And if you say, well, I'm a software engineer at, ABC company, and you never post that, well, my software engineering application helps this community, or my application helps this particular use case, then I don't know how to engage with you. I don't know how to reach out to you. And I don't know if you are going to be valuable towards what I need. So sometimes the folks that connect with you are actually looking for certain elements, and it may be coming from your employer, or it may be coming from an organization that you're part of. And that's one thing that I would just emphasize with folks. Don't just limit it to your employer, right? If you're part of an organization and you want to share that organization, then share, right? There's a lot of different great organizations that are out there, right? If you're part of the Red Cross, or you're doing things with United Way, or whatever the case may be, go ahead and reshare those as well, because it actually helps in creating that brand for you. That is how you define the brand, right? Is being able to say, okay, well, why are you at this company, and why do you like this company enough, right? It's like employee engagement. When we talk about employee engagement, it really is, are our employees so happy about our organization that they're willing to share it with their network? And if you are, then you love your job, right? Then you love what you do or what your company is able to do. And if you don't, then that's where you have to do the evaluation. Is there a delta? Is there a difference between what you would like to perceive versus the brand that your company has? And that's why you choose not to share. So I don't know. We talk about the best foods, right? If you have a good food, if you had a good dish, you'd be happy to talk about the restaurant. You know, if you have a good sports team, you're promoting that sports team, wearing the jersey.
Yeah.
So for an employer. If you're really happy about the employer, I'm sure you would want to share it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, anybody that's friends with me on Facebook knows I work for Power Supply, so I can absolutely agree with that.
Well,
Um,
the other side of it is that there are some individuals that, or some organizations that actually have applications. So you can check to see if your company has like a gaggle or some kind, or a Hootsuite or something else where you can time what you share. So this way it really just becomes, you select the articles that make the most sense to you and that align with the brand that you want to put out there in social media.
mhm. I like that. Okay, one more question on this. From the chat, Kenyatta had asked, did you update and modify your brand as you progressed through various roles and companies? Or is this something that you changed over time or only at key points throughout your work journey so far?
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's a great question, Kenyatta. Thank you for asking. Um, so I mentioned where I'm from, right? Philadelphia, inner city of Philadelphia. I didn't grow up in a super professional household, right? I was, definitely a product of my environment. So at one point, I used to wear jeans and polo shirts all the time. And I used to wear that to work until, I saw some of the VPs and the president walking around. Like, well, they wear a tie and a shirt every day. So I started to look at, what that brand represented, and then I heard, okay, well, you want to dress for the level that you want to get to, and I started wearing suit. Well, I started wearing shirts and ties. That became an evolution, and I started, doing Toastmasters. So, I want to pause. I want to do a pause right now, and I want to promote Toastmasters. If you are, struggling, or if you're interested in improving your public speaking, I would highly recommend checking out Toastmasters and joining one of your local clubs. It really helped me as I started to go through this trajectory, not only changing into the shirt and tie, but I joined Toastmasters organizations. So this way I can do the public speaking, and I can improve my public speaking, because you talk about it, but you also get evaluated when at the end of your speeches, and which really helped me improve some of the things that I did that were not best practice. So it really does help.
Absolutely. I'm one of those people that has to be taught how to be quiet as opposed to how to keep talking to people. So Toastmasters is something that I will absolutely recommend as someone who comes from the other side of the aisle, because I've seen a lot of my friends, uh, how shall we say, take up more room in conversations because they have participated in something like that. So whether you are an introvert or an extrovert, whether you enjoy public speaking or not, it will make you better at it. I can promise you that. I have seen it firsthand. Okay, let's see. A couple minutes left here. Let's see what else questions we get answered. Oh, okay. How can you assess if your personal brand is being accurately perceived by others? I thought this was a really good one.
Wow, that is a really good one. Perceived by others. Well, I'll say it's a couple layers to that, right? Because you can get the active feedback from friends and family. They can tell you, what's going on and what they see. Professionally, we get our evaluations and performance and things of that nature, where certain aspects and areas are being discussed and talked about. When we're part of our organizations, you can tell, if you're being helpful, people are reaching out to you. If you are good at solving problems, people are asking you questions. If you're good at delivering on events, people will ask you. So it's really a level of engagement that starts to happen once your brand starts to catch wind. But one of the things that we talked about earlier is you have to be vulnerable and participate. So you can't necessarily become that brand that you want to be unless you participate to a level, whether that's personally, professionally, academically, athletically, whatever the case may be. Because you think about the brand that someone has on the sports field, right? Because even after they are too old to play professional sports, they still do the pickup leagues, and you're still
Mhm.
getting picked, and you're still able to perform to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Um, I gave that up. I will say I tried to do the Turkey Bowl last year. It didn't work.
No.
No. But at the same time, it's being able to participate. And I would say, bringing your best to the forefront. And once again, going back to the conversation about imposter syndrome, if you prepare and you're ready for the opportunity, you're ready for the occasion, don't let fear overcome the impact and the folks that need you in that situation.
Yeah. Okay. When I read this question, I thought the same thing. It's a really, really good question. And the first thing that came to my mind was to basically have a survey and go around, ask, people in your life from various aspects. So if you're more concerned about what your professional brand is, then start by asking people that you have worked with, people that know you, and kind of start from there. And you can just ask them like, hey, what are three things that come to mind? If you know that I'm going to be on a team with you, what's three things that you know about me? What is it? What is something that you think of if somebody mentions my name? Because then at least you can try and like kind of get a jumping off point. So that way maybe you can have an idea of what people are saying about you because that might help to highlight, well, I really wish they were saying this about me. I remember having a reputation in college for being incredibly organized, over prepared. All of my notes were always impeccable. Granted, I was also undiagnosed. However, like it was something that I took a lot of pride in, but it took an inordinate amount of time to do so. And so knowing later on that like I probably didn't need to put in that amount of effort, people saw that I was organized even though, it wasn't something I was trying to show off. So to my mind, that was a good starting point for me because then I was able to find out what do people already sort of think about me and then what is missing from that list from my perspective. What do I want them to be saying about me?
It's interesting that you said that because not all of us have the ability to have a survey, and I would say that's amazing, based not only on your ability to be organized, but also to think about it. Like, what are the survey questions I should ask? The other thing that I would posit it and recommend is coaching,
Mhm.
right? So I even have a professional coach, and we have conversations, and we talk about certain areas, things I want to do, things I want to achieve. And when we meet, whether that's weekly or bi-weekly, we're talking about those areas and where I am and where I feel I am. And one of the things that I compare it to is being an athlete, right? A lot of the athletes that we celebrate had coaches, and those coaches were focused on bringing the best out of that individual, and not necessarily based on what they saw, but based on the potential that that person had. And that's what some of the good professional coaches out there are looking to do, is they want to bring your best self out based on who you are and not who they perceive you to be. So that's another thing to consider as you try to evaluate who you are.
I like that. I think that's a really good pointer there. Okay, probably the last question we'll get to before we need to turn it around and talk a little bit more about Elastic. Um, how often should one reassess or potentially adjust their personal brand? So let's say you've got people on this call, they've followed all of your instructions, they've looked at their headlines, they're trying to make sure what they want their personal brand to be. How often do you think people should reassess this?
Well, I mentioned it earlier, and it's interesting how it ties in, but I grade myself every year, right? And that grade is not only a grade or assessment of me continuing on as I did before, there are certain pivots that I have to make in order to achieve that outcome. So if I want to be a better leader, what leadership classes I'm going to take? Am I going to go to school or things of that nature? If I want to change my style, what, are some of the brands that I want to be associated to? So this way I can operate in certain environments. So I would say that, annually you should just at least take inventory of where you are and where you want to be. And if you're where you want to be, then no change is required. But if you're not, then that's when you should consider a change, right? And sometimes life circumstances can encourage that, and also location. right? And I talked about it a little bit earlier, being facetious, but if you're in Alaska, you're dressing a certain way, but if you move to the Caribbean, you're dressing another way. That is a pivot, right? And sometimes
Yeah.
you're pivoting what you're talking about and also what you're doing and what you're wearing. So those are things that you have to consider. It's based on the environment that you're in and what you need in order to provide the best outcome that you would like to provide.
The thing that I want to throw in here, y'all, as my 2 cents, is that when you reassess this yearly, it does not have to be at New Year's. It doesn't have to be near Christmas. It doesn't have to be any time of the year at all. Okay. Set up your own personal New Year's, and this is the day you're going to do it. If you're smart, you'll set it up far away from any other holidays, obligations. Don't worry about it, none of that garbage. March is a really good month to do this. So is July or August, because then nobody wants to do their jobs anyway. We're all just like hoping we were out for the summer. So set it up on your calendar, make it a yearly thing, but don't set it near a bunch of other days and deadlines because this is the easiest thing to toss because you're only doing it for yourself. So just just be smarter than me, okay? Be smarter than me. Set up an alarm to do it and do it at an off time of year. That way it'll be a lot easier for you to make sure that you are kind of giving yourself the best chance here. Oh, and Francois right. March 31st is the end of the fiscal year, so maybe not March. But yeah, no, I love all of this. Okay, last 5 minutes we have. Daryl, I want to bring us back around to talking a little bit more about Elastic. So one of the questions that is very popular with our group here is they want to know what Elastic's like. What does the company culture feel like? Could you sum it up in a word for us?
I will say it's it's innovative. Um, I joined this organization because it's an open source company. And I work for SaaS companies, I work for cloud companies, but when I came here, it's amazing on what things this solution solves, and the platform and the strength and the power of the platform. And when I heard, okay, well, it's a search engine for Uber and Lyft and Netflix and Booking.com and Wikipedia.com, I said, Home Depot. I said, are you kidding me? Like that, this is something that I've already used all the time. I just never put a name to it. And it was just awesome to put the name to it. So when I think about my experiences and the outcome, especially from a technology perspective, Elastic's always been there in the background. So I would say it's an innovative organization.
I love it. Okay, we're getting some really awesome word suggestions from the chat as well. So if you're in the chat, take a look at those, y'all. They're pretty good. Okay, my second question is your favorite part about working at Elastic.
I'm a people person, so I really do enjoy the people that I work with. It's just an amazing team. We're able to really take on the hardest problems and really come together in order to provide solutions for our customers. So it is the team that I work with, and I will say the strength of a phenomenal platform. So those two things are awesome. We also have a great leadership team. Our CEO, our CTO, and a lot of our CXOs are just awesome humans. When you're in an
Love to hear it.
organization, sometimes when you interact, you don't get that level of interaction. And you can meet our CEO. He'll be at our, sales kickoff, walking around and just having regular conversations with everyone. And that I think means a lot and goes a long way and definitely represents our source code.
Yes, absolutely. Let's see. We are also, hold on. Oh, last question here. Sorry. My last question for you is your top tip for someone who is interviewing. So this doesn't have to be Elastic specific, but if it is, that's fine. What would you recommend to somebody who is going to be going into an interview soon?
Yeah, I would say that, be know your story from an outcome perspective. Right? So not only qualitatively, but also quantitatively, right? So not only the behaviors and actions that you're taking within your role, but also what are the quantitative outcomes that you were able to achieve? The other thing is, and we think about PDCA. PDCA is plan, do, check, act, right? So how did you plan? What did you do to execute? How did you check that the work was right? And what actions did you take when there was a delta or when there was something that wasn't right? So those are things that I usually talk about is saying, well, talk about development of your plan, talk about development of your strategy, but also talk about the execution, what you did, who you work with, the team that you work with, and then what were the outcomes? What was the measurable impact that you made within that particular role? And if you bring bring that to the table, it does give the interviewer at least enough context to say, okay, well, this person really is on it. They know what they're doing, or, they were part of a team, not able to make as much impact as they wanted to, but just tried to make the most of their situation.
All right, I love all of this. Daryl, thank you so, so much. This has been wonderful to get to chat with you and learn from you today. Thank you so much for your time, your expertise, as well as, all of the prep work that went into this. It does not go unnoticed. So thank you so, so much. This has been wonderful.
My pleasure, Mag. Thank you, everyone. And I really do appreciate the time and spending this time with all of you. So I hope that you have a great day and a great year. Take care.
Awesome. Thanks, Daryl. All right, now, y'all, before we go, I do want to highlight a couple quick things. So I sent over the link to Elastic's company page. That's what you're looking at on the screen right now in front of you. If you are interested in making the most of this page, I'll give you some instructions on that in just a second. But before we do that, I also want to share a link. This is going to be to a registration page for an event that's happening in the coming weeks. It's also with a member of the Elastic team. We're going to be talking to, hold on, I just lost the page. There we go. We're going to be talking to Morgan Kirkland, who's the Global Vice President of Sales Development at Elastic. So if that interests you or you're interested at all in Elastic, I really recommend you check out that event. The other thing I recommend is that you check out, obviously, Elastic's company page. Now, if you are interested in applying with them, obviously you'll do that via the jobs tab that's right here. But the other thing I want to highlight for you is this follow button, that big pink button that says follow. Tapping that is going to do some really great things for you, but what it's going to do first and foremost is it's going to tell the Elastic team that you're interested in working with them even before you fill out a job application. And it's also going to allow Power to Fly to take the weight off of you in your job search because we will tell you when Elastic posts new roles. So you don't have to keep coming back and refreshing and rechecking job boards. Now, whether today was your first Power to Fly event or your last, I sincerely hope, your first Power to Fly event or your 50th, I sincerely hope it won't be your last. Whether you have joined us before or not, I can't wait to see you join us again on another chat. So go out there, y'all. Have a healthy, safe, happy day, week, weekend. And, have the day you deserve. Bye, y'all.
Take care, everybody. Bye.